And my name, for those that don't know me, I'm Kirsty Livingston, and I'm the Head of Membership and Strategic Partnerships at IoD Scotland. And I'm delighted to be hosting and handing over to my colleagues in a minute for our session today, which is on leadership, impact, influence and inspiration. So just a little bit about the IoD, and we're about connecting, developing and influencing for our members, and that's across Scotland and across the UK. And just a quick ask of you all, one of the things that we're doing just now is speaking to the Scottish and the UK governments on a daily basis for our members, and we'd love to hear from you today if what's working well and what's not working well for you from a government perspective, and we can take these opinions back to these government teams and try and help you with these. So anything you've got afterwards, please just drop me a note on that. It's really important that we represent all the different sectors, sizes and scales of business. So if you can help me with that, that'd be fantastic. So we'll put you on mute just now, and I will hand over to Russell Dalgleish, who's head of SBN, the Scottish Business Network, and also Exalta Capital Partners. And he will be talking to Neil Bradbrook, who's the founder of Ahead Business Consulting. So Russell and Neil are both in the Central Scotland Committee, and they're keen to help with connecting directors across that area in particular. So that's Stirling, Falkirk and Carrickmannanshire, and they might tell you a wee bit more about that. We're going to record today's session so we can use it in social media and share afterwards. And we can also share our contact details. So if you want to reach out to Russell, Neil or I, we'll be sharing that at the end. So we can use the chat function as well during the session, and I'll be watching for any things that come up, or if you've got any technical difficulties, just reach out to me on that. So thanks so much for joining us, and I'll hand over to Neil and Russell. Thank you.
I was tempted to open with a two Ronnies line, but I won't. Instead, I will do, I'm Russell Dalgleish, and welcome to this session.
And welcome from Neil as well.
Thank you very much. It's wonderful that you've all agreed to gather together. I think for many of us, we're IoD members. For some of us, we're not IoD members, but the thing that brings us all together is the fact we're all leaders. And through the wonder of one of the positives that come out of this terrible crisis we're facing at the moment is this idea that the whole world has come together. And this call is an example of that. So we'll just try and work out who is furthest away. So is there anyone from, I think we've got someone from Malta, is that correct? So, excellent. Anyone, if you just put the comments into the chat. So is there anyone joining this call from further away than Malta? No, Dundee doesn't count. So further away than Malta. Someone from Chicago and from India.
Dundee doesn't count.
That's fantastic. So you get that feeling that, hi, I think I'm in Paris. Excellent. And Chile as well. So I think we have a winner, which is Christian from Chile. So welcome all. I'm sitting today, as is Neil, we're sitting just outside Edinburgh. We're in the middle of the most wonderful weather in Scotland. It's been an absolutely tremendous couple of weeks. But of course, we, like the rest of you, are all in the same position, that we're existing within lockdown, all trapped at home. We're starting to see a move from around the world for companies and governments starting to plan a recovery and starting to move away from lockdown. And what we wanted to talk a bit about today is about what are we going to have to look for from leadership over the next few weeks and months, and in effect years, as we go through what's going to face us. So Neil and I have agreed on some particular subjects that we think would be good to discuss. So what we've got here is an introduction to the IoD, which Kirsty's very kindly given us. We're going to look quite briefly at 6 areas: the challenges leaders are facing, how we rebuild productivity and sales growth as we return to a more normal world, normal in inverted commas, of course, reimagine the business model. This is very important to me because we're going to have to change, many of us are going to have to change what we do. So I spend a lot of time on stages speaking, So I've had to learn to change that. And I have to be honest with you. One of my key differentiators was the fact that I'm quite tall at 6'6". So that was my big differentiator, which in the world of digital broadcasting is meaningless because all we ever see each other's heads. So I still have my Scottishness, but I'll have to work on something to replace my unique angle from being my height.
Russell, for the first time, we can say you and I are the same height. No one can tell, right?
That's absolutely spot on. My hair maybe a bit. We're going to talk a little bit about how we should approach re-engaging customers and staff and the people that surround our business. We're going to talk a bit about management teams, because it's enough for us as leaders to think about what's got to happen, but we've got to be able to delegate that leadership responsibility to our management teams. And then the development of a high-performance culture. So we're going to touch on each of these points quite briefly to bring out some key points that Neil and I have pulled together from our research. And then we're going to open up a question and answer session so we can all get a bit of a debate going. So I think we've run through the housekeeping. Questions go into the comments section. Could everyone, I'm sure I don't have to say this, but just watch your language in the comments section. I did a broadcast yesterday and someone was totally inappropriate, but we dealt with that. The session's going to be recorded. Yes, Kirsty smiling. So we're going to record the session so we can share that with you later. And if you need to get in contact with myself or Neil, our email addresses are there and we'll share with them at the end as well. So, Neil, the first question that you and I wanted to discuss.
You need to stop sharing the screen, I think, there.
Yeah. It's quite a lot of it to think at the same time. So, let's start with the challenges leaders are going to face as we come out of lockdown. What are the key challenges that you perceive that we're going to all be facing, Neil?
So thanks. And just before we start, I want to say we have passed the 100 marks, so that's a good milestone for us as well. So welcome to everyone. Challenges, we kind of put it, and you had it in the slide there, Russell. So three key things. We talk about rebuilding our productivity and sales, reshaping our business model, and re-engaging our customers and staff. But all of that is done against this backdrop of uncertainty. And we know that in business, we hate uncertainty, and how do we make decisions in that kind of space? So I live in a world where I like to kind of have a simple mind. So I like to simplify things down. So if I distill it down into a single word, I'd say relevant. So for me, it's all about staying relevant. And if we think about that, that actually means we have to tick all the other boxes off. So by staying relevant, it means we must adapt our business model to be relevant for the new normal, whatever that may look like. Staying relevant means being in tune with what our customers and staff are thinking and feeling. And by being in tune, we naturally engage in them. And staying relevant means that we have to think about our customers' needs and make sure we continue to address their needs. And if we do address customers' needs and we're engaging whilst we do it, then actually they will buy from us. They always have, they always will. And therefore, that's how we actually keep our business in the right place. So for me, it's a simple piece, but it helps focus the mind in that space.
That's excellent. I think you've captured the points quite precisely. Obviously, we practiced this first question from the research we did, and I had three areas I think we're going to have to focus on. I put these down as planning, momentum, and safety. So we have to plan. We're business leaders. We are excellent at writing plans and turning them into executionable tasks that we're going to deliver. We're going to have to put those plans together in a slightly loose way because there's a lot of unknowns at the present moment. But getting a plan down, imagining what your future is going to look like and making it an executable task list is essential. The second point for me is momentum. We're going to be moving from home for the first time in several weeks for many of us, going into a different environment. And it's going to be so important that we don't do it like returning after the Christmas holidays, where we spend a couple of days getting settled back in again and hearing what everyone did. We have to hit the ground running. To do that, we're going to have to start preparing several weeks out. We're preparing at the present moment with the companies who I work with on what that's going to look like. But I ask you, at 9 o'clock in the morning on that first day back in the office, if that's the route you're taking, it has to be like any other first day back in the office on a Monday morning. The third element is safety. As business owners and business leaders, we have a responsibility towards our staff and our customers to ensure safety, but safety is now going to become the #1 critical issue. We're going to have to comply with the restrictions within our own geographies and make sure that necessary support is there to make sure everyone feels safe. And it's not just safe in the office, it's safe getting from home to the office or safe in traveling. And I want everyone's going to have to think about that. So for me, it's planning, momentum, and safety. Neil, you'd raised a very good point with me about business models and how we're going to have to reshape those business models. Do you want to talk a little bit? Could you start with just a little bit of a definition of what you mean personally by business model?
Sure. So the business model is essentially it's our whole structure and enterprise. So it's what we do. It's what price we sell it at and for whom. So it's essentially the essence of what brings us revenue, what services we provide for our customer, and our very essence and purpose of being. So we have to think about that. And we talk in business about pivot. So the world has changed so much right now. It's a classic pivot, but just on a massive scale, because actually the whole world potentially is pivoting. Now, the really interesting thing here is, again, it's about that uncertainty and understanding how much we have to pivot and how we do it. So in our world, we've been helping a lot of businesses with this over the past few weeks, as you know. So we've kind of brought this down into three key questions that everyone has to address for their own businesses. So the first one is actually, what of my business model is still viable? So what can I do and what can't I do? And we actually do this, we break it down and put a single line against each different thing we do. And we're aiming for 4 or 6, it's maximum 10. So if you're a retailer, for example, you'll have one for I sell stuff in my store, you might have another for I sell stuff online, but it's distilling it there. And then for each time period, we look at, can I do it now in the next 4 weeks? Can I do it in 2 to 3 months? And can I do it beyond? And we're not going beyond the end of the year much at the moment, but it allows people to literally say yes, no, or yes, but I have to adapt it slightly. And that shows how much of our previous business model before COVID is actually still viable. And we did this for work for the customer who's an IT support company last week, and actually most of their model is still viable. There may be a question whether their customers are ready to buy and engage with them, but they can do most things remotely. So that's kind of ticks. Other people, for example, restaurants or hospitality trade, they would have a series of crosses all the way through, so they need to pivot much more and think differently. But it shows us how much we need to adapt and change. Then the second and third questions are about looking to the future and new opportunities. So we always have disruption. None of us would have chosen this to happen. The disruption itself is not a bad thing because it shakes up the status quo, it stimulates innovation, and it makes us kind of lose some of the things we've been clinging on to. So we've got over 100 people on a Zoom call. We wouldn't have done this 2 months ago because we'd be meeting people face to face. So we've all moved the times, and this technology has been around a while, but it's taken something like this to get us experience with it. And now that creates new opportunities. So the first question is what constraints have gone that open up different things? And an obvious one is everyone is much more savvy on tech and prepared to do tech and remote. So actually geographic boundaries have disappeared. So in the services industry like we are, we used to service Scotland, but now we could serve people anywhere and help people across the world because we can do it. So that's the first of those things to think differently. The second is what new problems are people facing. So think about, we can do a silly one at the moment. People have been worrying about how I get my hair cut. So that was spiking in Google about how do I cut my hair at home, right? I'm okay. I felt my time was now. But that was a real problem for people. And actually a hairdresser, for example, who couldn't cut it physically, well, if I was a hairdresser with the skills, I'd have been setting up Zoom calls, inviting people on, and I'll teach you how to cut your own hair. Because it's a new problem that people have that didn't exist before, that you have the skills to face. So we always look at what assets do we have, and that's skills, that's people, that's products, services, that we can help address these new problem challenges. So that's what we need to look at differently. And the more we need to pivot, the more we need to think creatively in that space. But there's so much opportunity there. And some of the other changes, because it accelerates the way of thinking, is people are thinking local, people are thinking more community and focus. So what can we do in that space to help that and leverage some of the things?
Absolutely perfect. I think I'd struggle to add anything to that. My only thought was about the environment our business exists in. So we have to look at that environment and we have to consider what can we imagine is going to happen, the fortune telling. I was at an event, I think on Monday. Someone gave a brilliant presentation where they talked about 2020, the year of 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. So in the UK, we're going to have COVID, social distancing, recession, and then we end the year at Hogmanay with Brexit. So those are 4 challenges we're going to have to face. But of course, we can foretell them. We know they're probably going to come, so we can plan for them. We've all got to take advantage of the lucky breaks we get. So I've had an incredibly lucky break, which was 10 years ago. When we did a house extension, my garage ended up in the back garden and we converted it into a home office. Now, at that point, I had no idea how lucky that was going to be. So I've gone to work every day in my normal place of work, which is my home office. So think about what can you foretell and grab every piece of luck you come across. And that leads us on to this engagement piece. The engagement piece with customers and with staff. Now, you've got some really good insights here on how we should go about thinking about that, Neil. Would you like to talk a little bit about those?
I touched on a little bit earlier when I talked about being in tune. So that's the first thing, is be really sensitive to how people are feeling and understand that also some people are feeling different at different times. But I also kind of mentioned that things have accelerated change. So for a while we've been talking about, every generation has a different view of the world. And Generation Z has already been talked about, or the millennials, that they're actually much more interested in the purpose of a company than necessarily just profits. And I think what this has done is accelerated that kind of thinking, but across the spectrum as well. So everyone now is realizing actually money isn't necessarily the most important thing in the world. My family and my health are the most important things in the world. And therefore, there's a slightly different shift of priorities. And I think what we'll see coming out of this is the businesses who have a good purpose that their customers and staff buy into, rather than just pure profits or whatever, are the ones who are more in tune with what the public wants and thinking about flexible working. We've now discovered we can work from home in different ways, shapes or form. Businesses will find that actually, how can I help my staff have this more flexible working arrangement which suits them, allows better work-life balance, and it's getting that kind of piece. The second aspect I'd say in this space is communication. It's really difficult, right? Because we've got this really bad habit as people, and particularly as leaders, that we kind of want to wait until we know all the answers before communicating. So invariably, right now, we don't. And therefore, what we do is you run the risk of just not communicating at all, and you've got this vacuum. But actually, when we're in times of uncertainty, people need to hear stuff. But what they actually, it's if we don't have the answers, rather than just wait, we need to tell them what we know and what we don't know. And the classic example is flights. So when we used to go to these things called airports and fly places. We while ago, I know we've all been there when we're looking at the board. It says okay, 5 minutes before the flight goes, suddenly it's gone an hour late, and then suddenly it's 3 hours late, and then it's cancelled, but no one's telling us anything. And what really causes the uncertainty and the anxiety is the lack of communication. The reason they don't is because they're waiting till they have the answers to be able to tell us when it is going to happen, and they don't know. But they'd be much better off actually just saying, look, what we do know is your flight's still stuck over there, it's not going to sit some time. We're trying to source other flights, we don't know if we can get one or not yet. We'll get back on and give you an update in half an hour, whatever we know. And just giving that kind of piece actually helps people move forward. So for leaders, it's really important to communicate, and right now you can't over communicate. So it's just make sure we keep a really regular dialogue with our staff, with our customers. Let's use this time and opportunity to really build strong relationships. And the third point I'd say is be positive. So there's an awful lot of doom and gloom out there. Again, people need positivity, and people need to look to the future. And it's our role as leaders we talk about inspiring at the start of this. We need to do that. So we need to find future positives and talk about things which can actually take people on that journey with us and give them a positive future, because there is good change will come out of this. As I said before, we wouldn't have chosen it, and there's lots of bad things that happen. We can't control that. What we can control is what we do with it now and how we make the best we can of it and make positive things happen.
Excellent. And I'm following a lot of your advice on this. So thank you for that, Neil. When it comes to this idea of engaging with our customers and staff, I'm very fortunate that I'm born Scottish. So because I'm born Scottish, I studied Burns at school. And Robert Burns has a fantastic line in a poem, and I'll attempt to read this, and all you poetry experts out there just have to behave. So Burns said, "I wad some power the gift to gie us, to see ourselves as others see us." So what Burns was saying there in my eyes was to try to see the world through the other person's eyes. So when I'm thinking about people coming back to work, I try to think about what's it like to be a member of staff in one of my companies about to step out, what are the challenges that they're going to face. And I think if you do that, it just gives you the idea that you'll have some kind of hints on what to think of and how to plan for this. There's a couple of really good questions come in, and it's just to say that the slides and the entire session will be available afterwards. And someone said that, someone's asked a good question, which is, do we have an insight into when people will return to work? And the answer is no, we don't. And we don't have an insight into what to return to work means. But what we do have a responsibility as leaders is to plan for it. So even if we have the plan and we don't execute that plan, at least we've done the thinking, and that prepares us for when we find out when return will be. No, we could well hear on Sunday night from the Prime Minister that it's much sooner than we thought. The next point was about how do we make effective decisions when there is so much uncertainty. So I'll just go first. So to me, this is just business as normal. So in business as normal, there always was uncertainty, but we weren't aware of it. We took a decision to assume the world tomorrow would be the same as the world today. What we're actually faced with now, to my mind, isn't so much uncertainty. It's actually quite good certainty for the next couple of months. We kind of got an idea what will probably happen. We don't know the detail, so that allows us to plan for it. But what about yourself, Neil? What's the approach you take to making these effective decisions?
So there's a couple of things. One, we can do some scenario planning. So we can think about what if scenarios and consider, if this happened, what would I do in that circumstance? So whilst we don't know exactly what will happen, we kind of have a good idea of things that might happen. And therefore we could think, well, if that happened, how would I react as a business and what would I do? And what that gives us is it gives us a suite of different playbooks, if you like, that means we can react quickly. But then going back to the leadership point of view, uncertainty is one of the most important things that we need to take responsibility for. We don't like making decisions without that, but our staff, it's a bit like the communication. They need certainty. So if I don't know, actually what I need to do as a leader is I need to make a decision. So we take responsibility for dealing with the uncertainty, and we make a decision. We're going to say, I've looked at scenarios, I'm going to assume that this is what will happen, so therefore go and do this. And I'm going to give an example from this, which is, it's dating back to the 1960s. So there was this little thing going on called the space race. And obviously America were behind, but they wanted to get to the moon first. So they were trying to build the actual NASA moon landing, not the Apollo series. This is actually to land an unmanned thing on the moon, and it was the first thing which was going to go on the moon. But the problem was they had no idea what the moon was like, because no one's ever been there before. So the engineers were saying, well, we can't build it because we don't know if the surface is dusty, or if it's rocky, or if it's sharp and spiky. So if we put these type of wheels on, it won't work. So we're stuck, we can't build. So there was a lady called Phyllis Buwalda, and she was heading up this program, and she said, it's dusty, it's a bit like the desert in Nevada, go build it. Now, did she know that was the answer? No. But without that, they weren't ever going to build anything or do anything. So she took the responsibility for the uncertainty and maybe getting it wrong on her head. But by making a decision, she gave certainty to her people and allowed them to build it. And she said, and if it's wrong, I'm the one, and I'll go and tell the president, unfortunately we lost it because we got it wrong, and that was me. But it gave them to do it. And on top of that, If she got it wrong and it turned out to be sharp and spiky or rocky or whatever, then the chances are she would not be spending that much time on the moon anyway. As it happened, actually, the guess was good. The surveyor landed in 1966 and was able to get great samples, and that gave a huge impetus to the Apollo program, which is why America got there first. So sometimes as leaders, we have to deal with uncertainty by doing some scenario planning to help shape our thoughts and then putting a stake in the ground. And it allows us to move forward directionally. Now, we're not building the moon landing at the minute where if we got it wrong, we can't change. But directionally go right. If it's slightly different later, we'll just tag because we're going in the right direction. We've got some plans.
Excellent. I think that the other thing I would add about making these effective decisions is I realized a long time ago, and I have to admit this was a bit of a shock, I realized that I don't know everything. So once I accepted the fact I don't know everything. Do you want to put everyone on mute just now, Kirsten? Thank you. So realizing that, I've surrounded myself with experts, advisors, and coaches. So I'll give you an example of this. So I've started to create quite a lot of online businesses or get involved in online business. I'm involved in this. How do you make an event work online? So tomorrow I've got a call with a gentleman called Joe Goldblatt. So Joe is in effect the leading expert on events in the world. I know Joe holds this title because he's written 40 books on it, and I know event professionals who studied his books at university. So I've got a call with him tomorrow so that he can give me some advice on how to actually go about this, taking forward online businesses. So that idea about finding an expert and somebody you can empathize with who can help is absolutely critical.
And if I just add to that, so let's say you even had a leader who did know everything about their business. The reality is we're too close to our own business, and we need that external view, particularly now because none of us have ever been here before. There isn't a single expert in the world who has lived through this pandemic and seen what it's done to business and got a playbook which works. So having different perspectives from outside your business to bring views, to be a sounding board, and also to share the burden, because you need to actually offload some of it. If we're making those big Phyllis Wilder decisions ourselves, sometimes we need someone not in the business we could share that with. So I think the expert advisors is really critical right now. So that's great comments, Russell.
So following on from that, we can take advantage of this particular moment when we're on this call together. No, you're watching and listening to myself and Neil discussing these points, but at the same time, people are placing questions into the chat. So we have over 100 leaders on this call. So if you notice someone asking a question or making a point in the chat where you think you can help them, then you add something into the chat. Because someone might then walk away from this event going, hey, it wasn't those two that did all the talking. It was actually someone else who said something on the chat that I identified with. So take advantage of this moment. If you see someone who puts something in the chat and you've got an insight on that, then add it.
And maybe if I just reflect on the chat. So we've got a comment in there at the moment. What would Shackleton do now? So as you know, Russell, I actually posted, put a wee post on LinkedIn about Shackleton and Klopp a couple of days ago. So I'd be interested in your views. So I know you and I talked about Shackleton earlier this week as well. So what's your take on Shackleton and what he might do now?
Well, I some years ago I developed a bit of an obsession with Shackleton, and I went to see a lot of the remnants of the trip that are available, including the care that they sailed. And I loved it, but it became almost a good plan because they did it just at the outbreak of the First World War. So the men that travelled with him suffered great harm and returned and did serve on the front. And I like what Shackleton did more than anything else was that no one was ever in any doubt what the plan was. He was really clear telling people what the plan was. And I think as leaders, and I know myself, sometimes I think I've explained it to everybody, but they haven't quite understood what the plan is. So what I ask people to do is to take my interpretation of what the plan is and to write their own version of it. And that way we can be assured that we're all aligned. But you're not a Shackleton fan, you're a Klopp fan.
Well, I love both. I mean, so because my post was what have Shaq and Klopp got in common, and for me, actually, it's all about people. So what Shackleton did is when he was recruiting for the journey, he didn't actually recruit the people who had the best skills for the job. He recruited people who were the best fit for the team and best fit for the job, and he felt would fit in. And then he created this team ethos. So when they were traveling on the boat down there, whether you were wherever you were in the hierarchy, him, his officers, or the men, they all mucked in and did the tasks. So it had this one team ethos. Now, when the going got tough, by having that strong team spirit, that's one of the things which helps you get through. And clearly, this benefited from luck as well to get where they did without any loss of lives. But actually, by having a good team spirit and morale, help brings luck. And that's the similarity for Klopp. So Klopp has brought a huge, breath of fresh air into football. But the team spirit he has fostered at Liverpool is absolutely second to none. As a Liverpool fan, so I'll put my hand up and say I have a vested interest in this. I've studied quite a lot. And Virgil van Dijk is possibly the best centre-back in the world. And he was interviewed and he was talking about Klopp. And when he talked about him, whole transcript, he doesn't once mention anything about strategy, tactics. He's just talking about the man and people leadership. And he says, he makes us feel great. Every single morning, he's genuinely pleased to see every one of us, right? And he says he can be tough when he's needed, but we know he cares. And because we know he cares, that's why he's able to demand so much from us. So it's a really powerful message from the best defender in the world to say this about the person. And for me, there's a really big piece around one of the key things for leadership is trust. So without trust, we have nothing. And there was a great article in Harvard Business Review earlier this week by a lady called Frances Fry. And she distilled trust down into 3 things from a leader. So you need to be authentic, you need to have logic, and you need to have empathy. And what that means is authentic, people have to believe they're seeing the real you. So if they think they're seeing a fake you that you're putting on, doesn't he wash? The logic is about they have to trust you make good decisions. So they believe that actually you've got capability, expertise, and the empathy is they need to believe you care. And for me, Klopp really ticks all those 3. We've heard about the care, but actually the authentic is probably one of the biggest things he does differently. And it's because he's got those 3 that he stands out and has been able to do what he's done from a leadership point of view. And maybe I'd just like to flip onto that, because I know we're going to talk about high-performing teams anyway, Russell. But then if I share my screen here, so we do a lot of work on high performing teams and how to create that culture. And I've talked about Klopp, the leader, but actually that needs to be the team as well. So having a strong leader is great, but Liverpool doing what they've done only works because the team has bought into it and has developed themselves and become more than just a unit of individuals or more than just the leader. So for me, it's kind of drawing it all together. And actually at the middle of this, we see it's all about open, safe, and trusting environment. So that builds on the trust of the leader agendas, but actually makes it stronger as well. And that's what's at the heart of everything. So we have to trust one another, believe it, and support one another. But then all the other bits tying together. And you talked about Shackleton and the plan. So that's about the purpose. People know their roles and responsibilities. People feel empowered and can actually join in. So it's giving that authority out to other people. And you said, Russell, for yourself, that you write the plan and then tell people to interpret it. So you're empowering them to say, I understand my role in the plan, and now this is how I'm going to do about it. And the team has to be more than the sum of parts, which is where we get this diversity. And right now we have to be able to adapt. And the sense of value is we believe in what we're doing. So this is kind of the whole piece which joins it together. And if you get these things, this is what creates sustainable long-term growth, but you have to tie all the dots together. What's your views on that from the team place? You're mute, Russell.
I'm sitting here nervous because I know what you're going to do now is you're going to use technology and share a video with us. Now, I know the video will work, and I know it worked when we were trialing, but can everyone, fingers crossed everyone, if you want to come onto the, just before you go into the video, there was a brilliant quote in the chat, and someone talked about that analogy about getting the right people on the bus. And I have to tell you, I had the weirdest experience. I was doing a lecture to someone, a business leader, and we were getting on really well, and he loved the concept of the right people on the bus. But as a strong-willed Texan, he interpreted it as not getting the wrong people off the bus. So he actually said to me, yeah, Russ, what we're going to do is we're going to chuck the wrong people off the bus and then drive over on them a couple of times. And I realized he just completely misinterpreted my idea. But anyway, Neil,
yeah,
let's see your video.
I've got to say, and just I've seen the chat around the graphic identity and culture, absolutely critical. They're actually part of the purpose bubble here. So the purpose includes your why, if you like the Simon Sinek video, includes your vision, includes your values, it includes your identity. So that's all in that purpose bubble. And the purpose bubble is a good segue because that's what I want to talk about. And actually in here is the importance of shared goals. So I want to play a little video. So I'm going to share a different screen. Now, this is going to take us to Atlanta and the Paralympics in Atlanta. So if I can find a way to expand that screen in a minute. So this is swimming competition. It's a medley, 4 people. So they're swimming together. In the top of it, when I press it going in a minute, this is GB. So they'll be talking about a guy called Mark Woods. I know he's English and we're in Scotland, but it's GB, so we can all give him a cheer as well. And he's trying to come back against the Germans. This is the final leg of that and see how he gets on. So actually, if I hit green, that should expand it out.
And back comes Mark Woods for Great Britain. They're inside the final 25 now. Woods has pulled back 7 metres. There's only a half a metre in it now. Mark Woods of Great Britain is getting on level terms with Oliver Anders of Germany. Anders just holding on. Woods is coming back again though. But Anders gets it. 12 100ths of a second means another gold medal for Germany, silver for Great Britain, but I'm afraid that means that Germany will finish in 3rd position in the overall medals table, and surely it couldn't have been closer. The German team of Kimmich, Läufer, Schmidt and Anders doing the job. Mark Woods doing the race of his life and possibly having the disappointment of his life. A superb swim, 12 100ths of a second, and that shot says it all. Mark Woods of Great Britain anchoring that great medley relay team, but only good enough to win silver in 4:41.62. The team of Buren, Matthews, Long and Woods win yet another silver for the British swimming team here in Atlanta.
Okay, so 12 hundredths of a second. And when he started that, so in 2 lengths of the pool, when he started off, as you heard, he was 7 meters behind and so close to catching up. Now, Mark Woods is my favorite speaker I've ever seen. I've seen him 3 times, so he's a bit like the Rolling Stones, if you like, for me, of speakers who you see the most. When he talks about this, he said they didn't realize what went wrong until he saw the video himself afterwards and watched this. And you have happy face, happy face, and sad face. And the problem was that 2 of the team wanted a medal and 2 of the team wanted gold. So he was absolutely devastated, as we saw at the end of that he got silver and not gold. 2 of the team actually just wanted a medal of any color. That was fine. And there was a decision made.
Neil?
Yep.
Neil, we can't quite hear you. You've gone a bit quiet.
Can you hear me now? Is that better?
Better, yeah.
There was a decision made by one of the team where when you're about to jump off from the diving board, he waited until the man had fully touched before he pushed off and lost over half a second on the German, and they lost for 1200ths. And that's what made the difference. Now, I promised on one of the tweet posts earlier this week, they had a wee treat for us as we come in. So actually the treat is, I'm not going to talk anymore about Mark Woods, because Mark Woods is with us today and he's going to talk about Mark Woods himself. So I'd love to introduce Mark, if you'd like to take the floor.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for inviting me. I'm hoping you can hear me clearly. I think that my internet and broadband was probably laid down a similar time to when that video was recorded, and the quality is somewhat the same. So if I disappear, I apologize. But yes, thank you for spoiling my afternoon and playing that piece of video for me, Neil. Yeah, it was a really challenging moment in my career because I'd invested so much time and effort to get to that point, and then to realise that we failed because of such a simple thing like agreeing on what success looked like, or failing to agree on what success looked like, seemed like a really basic error to make. I was able to rectify that in future games, and we did go ahead and win in Sydney. But that particular games, as you say, there was a very distinct difference between what two of us thought success looked like, and what the other two thought success looked like. And as a consequence, people started behaving in certain ways and making certain decisions that made it increasingly unlikely we were ever going to win. So it was as they say in motivational sessions, to say it was a learning experience. I learned a lot that week. And the only upside is that it's now part of my presentations, and I get to eke a few pennies out of it. And those of you that were wondering, there was also a Scottish person within that team.
Thanks, Mark. And we're going to move into Q&A shortly, so you can think about questions for Mark as well. But just one for me, Mark, I thought I'd put to you. One of the things that Jurgen Klopp did when he first came into the club is he said it's not just about the footballers, it's about the club. And he went and personally introduced himself to every single one of the team, from the cleaners to the people in the cafeteria and the restaurant, and he actually made all the players go and do the same. So I just wondered kind of your views on that. So swimming is quite often an individual sport or a team of four, but actually it's part of a bigger community. And have you found that in your career?
Yeah, I mean, swimming, you think of it as a solo sport, but actually the number of people investing their own time in you is considerable, whether it's a coach or a physiologist or a nutritionist or a doctor or the pool cleaner who's making the facility clean for you to use. And we've mentioned the NASA program, and you've mentioned Jurgen Klopp. I had my own kind of moment where I realized that everybody understood that if they could do their job as well as they could, it impacted on our chance of winning another gold medal. And that was when the cleaner at the pool came up to me, where I used to train, came up to me after Sydney and just said, "That was amazing, that race. I'm part of that team, aren't I?" And it was such a huge moment when he said that to me. I could have snapped a piece of my medal off and given it to him. But it was a little bit like that old story that you'll have all heard of JFK going to NASA during the Man on the Moon program and speaking to somebody who was sweeping the floor and asking them what their role was, and this person saying, "Well, it's my role to help get a man on the moon." And that was my Man on the Moon moment, where we realized that everybody understood they had a role to play, and they understood if they could play it to the best of their ability, and we could all support them to do that, we had a better chance of a positive outcome.
No, that's brilliant. Thank you, Mark. So we've got questions starting to come through. Please put more in there. So I'll pick out the first one here. So Maggie's asked, when you've got an overall vision to take the organisation forward, but not everyone sees the vision in the same way, what steps can you take to get the cynical person on board, or cynical people on board? Russell, do you have any views on that one?
Oh, right, okay. I think a vision for me is all about telling a story. So if I look at Scottish Business Networks, that's a social enterprise we created a few years ago. And it really started to accelerate once we came up with a vision that everyone could buy into. And that vision was to create the largest diaspora group or diaspora group of Scots on the planet. So we've now got about 10,000 and 9,400 in the global community. Now, what bought in, the word that got everyone to buy in was biggest. So people liked that idea that we were challenging ourselves to do something. And what we did was we wrote to everyone in the group, not the 10,000, the close group, and said, this is our vision, what do you think? And got them to feed back on whether or not they agreed with it. And there was quite a lot of discussion about the word biggest, but actually by engaging in the conversation, we got everyone to buy in. Oh yes, the other thing I did is that when I announced our vision was to create the largest Scottish community on the planet, I did it while dressed in a kilt. So I got their buy-in because I was looking terribly Scottish as well.
Mark, thoughts from yourself on that one?
Sorry, what? Talk about a kilt?
No,
I missed some of Russell's comment.
No, the original question is, if you've got a vision, but not everyone, so it says a vision for the board, not everyone's on board, what steps can you take to try and get those who are resisting on board?
Well, I think there's a bit of a process. The first is you can't ask people to go a certain direction if you're not seen to be pulling your weight yourself. If you're not delivering yourself, why should people follow you? You have to then ensure people are clear what their role is, and that's articulated in a variety of ways. You talk about you can't over communicate. Well, that's certainly a time when you can't over communicate. It's clarity of role. You make sure people are rewarded appropriately, and then and everybody's is motivated differently. But to take Russell's point about the Texan who said, you know, if you're not on the bus, get off the bus, and if you get in the way of the bus, I'll run you over. There is a little bit of logic in that, in that if the people that shouldn't be on the bus don't get off the bus, or you don't help them off the bus, then the people who made the effort to get on the bus begin to wonder why they did in the first place.
Yeah.
So you have to deal with those people.
And I'm delighted you said that, because that was, I thought I was going to be the only one pulling the hard punch on this one, saying, look, it's the top bubble on that slide I showed earlier. It is absolutely critical for a high-performing team that actually people do buy into the purpose, believe it, and get. So if someone's not getting it, I'd engage with them and communicate and try and understand actually what is it they're not buying into and why. And then you can see if it's a communication piece or an understanding piece. And if it is, great, because we can resolve that. If it's not, and they actually fundamentally don't really want to be on it, I'm with Mark, actually, because having a bad apple in there will slowly erode it. You will not be able to achieve high performance as a team if you have someone who's pulling against everyone else, because it will actually disrupt that whole piece.
And Neil, if I may, Neil, as well, I mean, I've been having a lot of conversations with business leaders at the moment, and there's absolutely no doubt challenging times right now, but also ahead. But there is an opportunity for organizations to have the kind of conversations that they should have had previously with some of those people that they shouldn't have in their organization anymore, because they are going to have to lose people. Some of them, there will be, as they say in America, regretted attrition, and they wouldn't want them to leave. But there'll be some where it's an opportunity to lose people that they should have probably said goodbye to before. And that sounds really heartless. But you've got to take the opportunities where they present themselves, and that is one right now.
Okay.
I think the other common question that's coming up at the moment, Neil, is about communication. And you know, if we think of ourselves as a group on this call, Neil and I are communicating, we're doing it one way. We're allowing you to communicate back, but in a textual format against specific points. So if we want to lead this group forward to perhaps have more of these types of events, we have to communicate better with you. And in particular, we have to get your buy-in to doing this again. So, for example, so Neil and I, after this event, will have to come up with a way to probably post something on LinkedIn about the event and ask for your comments there. Maybe there's some of you will speak to you direct. We'll connect on LinkedIn. But it's to try to pull together that communication so as all of us as leaders are clearly communicating. And when it comes to communication, we can't tell if it's worked. The only way the company is going to find out if the people we're communicating to reflect back the same message that they've bought into, and they reflect that back in their own language. And that's why I did an analysis piece with a company in London a few years ago, and I asked all the members of staff, what the company culture and values were. And most of them got it right. I then asked the members of the board, and not one of them knew what any of them were, because culture and values was something they'd done to the staff. So it's getting that insight, trying to understand what we don't know. So I think communication is absolutely key. It's interesting because I spend a lot of time outside Scotland, I've learned that to communicate, I have to slow down. So I maybe move to 75% of my normal speed to allow people to understand my accent. Over to you, Neil, on communication.
No, so I think that's spot on. And if we look at some of the other questions that have just come up, that's reflected. So we've got leadership has to be an action. So not just do what I say, right? Do what I do, which is what you're talking about. And then another question was coming up: what type of leadership is best for this crisis? And again, it's not just people directing; it's people understanding. So it's in here, authenticity we talked about before, but the role of the leader has to be to set a position and a direction, and then encourage people collectively to come along with that. And communication is the only way you possibly do that. So communication is got to be absolutely critical through this whole piece, as I talked about earlier as well. And it's a two-way communication street. So communication is not the leader says. The leader has to listen, just as you talked about here. We've used the chat function to people's feedback, but in your organization, if you're a smaller organization of 10, 20 people, you can probably communicate directly with everyone. That's great. If you're a larger organization with thousands, you have to find a way for them to be able to communicate back up the line to you, which works, and genuinely listen. Because actually, what's the other thing I've been in large organizations, they set these feedback things, but do they actually listen to what comes back?
There's a brilliant question from Joe Smith. So Joe's asked the question, often the decision makers do not make the best decisions. How do you address this effectively? And I think to me, that's that idea about managing up as well as managing down. In my career, I've 3 times held the position of chief exec. And I remember the first time I did it, I climbed the career ladder all the way to the top, and I'm chief exec now, and I've got the big boardroom and hundreds of staff, and I'm a success, and I'm in control. And then I met the board. This was the board that was in a different continent, who had a completely different understanding of how I should be doing my job. And it was actually, that relationship was the hardest thing I did in that company. And that learning how to manage up the way is an absolute core skill it takes. I have to be honest, I found manipulation worked really quite well, but it was how to do that, how to manage up, how to address the fact when the people at the top, the board would tell me to do something, and I'd say, no, that's not going to work, because just no wouldn't work. I had to come up with different ways to do it. So it's a really good question. How about yourself, Neil?
So there's a couple of good questions in here. Talk about listening and the importance of listening in that communication, as we talked about. And then also saying here that some of the women leaders are proving to be more effective right now, partly because they're listening, but actually because they're not afraid to live with uncertainty. And this is one of the problems. As we said, there isn't an expert who knows the answers here or a playbook. Our politicians don't like telling people they don't know. So, Boris doesn't want to stand on the dispatch box and answer a question with, I'm sorry, I don't know that. So then you get bluster. And what we lose, going back to the trust thing, we stop trusting them. We don't think they're being authentic. We don't think they're being honest. So the leaders who are prepared to say, I don't know, but we'll do the best we can. And this tends to be some of the female leaders. So it's not because they're women, it's because of how they're behaving. And the men could definitely take a leaf out of some of their books. Another question here, interesting one. So I played my Klopp piece earlier. So I've talked about Liverpool as this shining example of a team, but there was this very public spat earlier in the season between Mane and Salah, where Mane was furious that Salah hadn't passed him and threw all his toys out the pram as he was substituted. And the press, being the press, tried to milk this for weeks afterwards. So I guess the challenge here, or the question is probably, how can I say Liverpool are a high-performing team if that's what's happening? What I'd say to that is, I'm okay with that happening. And would I rather it didn't happen in public? Of course. But we have to understand the footballers, it's a bit like us having our exco meeting or our board meeting in front of a public the whole time. We're not always going to agree with every decision all the time, but we get there and we work together. So I don't have a problem with the incident happening, depending what happens afterwards. So this is where it's really important in a high-performing team that we will have disagreements, and it's how we deal with it. And all the evidence I've seen afterwards is team spirit seems to be perfect. There seems to be no ongoing dispute between them. You see the interaction between them off the pitch as well as on the pitch, and clearly there aren't any long-term disagreements in the players. So I think it's important to understand we're not always going to agree with everyone we work with, and that's okay. Disputes are fine because actually it's healthy. If we all thought the same thing all the time, then actually we've got the wrong people around the table, because going to my point earlier, we do not have diversity. So we should have different views. We then talk about it and come to the right answer, and then we move on in the right way because we're a good team. So for me, it's okay to have disagreements, and people sometimes shy away from that. It's about how you have them.
Thank you, Neil. So we're just coming to the end of this session. We hope this is going to be the first of many. I think this has worked really well, and thank you all for your contributions. I'm just going to ask a final question to Mark, and then I'll hand over to Kirsty just to close things. So Mark, what we've been talking about today, of course, is these key aspects of leadership as we go into this completely unique time. For many of us, we will be returning to the office after 6 weeks to try to instill a sensation of desire within our staff to do something in what's going to be a really difficult market. What advice are you giving to people about how they should adjust their leadership style at this time?
For me, it's all around inclusion. So most organizations are spending a lot of time right now over the recent years talking about having to get their diversity right, and they call it diversity and inclusion, but they don't really understand what inclusion means. So they'll get focused on a quota of the number of women who are on a board, or they'll focus on ethnicity or sexual orientation. Inclusion is about everybody being able to bring themselves to work and be their best at work, and being welcome to be that little bit different. And my hope is that by working as we are, we've actually become a little bit more inclusive, because we're all removed from the kind of office space that a lot of people work in. Those people that maybe did have challenges with childcare or accessibility are the same as everybody else now. And it would be great if leaders could be a little bit more inclusive, because we are having to be understanding. We are having to understand that some people are not only being asked to work from home, where they maybe don't have the setup they need, but at the same time they're being asked to homeschool their kids, and they've maybe got to do some shopping for an elderly relative or whatever. It is unusual, and the leaders that are excelling are using those inclusive leadership skills.
Thank you, Mark. So
inclusion's a great way to finish that, Mark. Thank you. So again, thank you to everyone, and I'll just hand over to Kirsty just to close us now at 4 p.m.
Just before we hand over to Kirsty from Mate, so as Russell's hinted at, we are going to do another one of these. So in a fortnight's time, we'll be doing another leadership session. So we'd love you all to come back and join, because there's so many questions in the chat we haven't had time to come to today. Also, please, be delighted if you wanted to link in with Russell and myself on LinkedIn and make a connection there. And I don't know about the rest of you, but I know for sure I would like to hear more from Mark, which is great, because actually in a fortnight's time, Mark has very kindly agreed to give us his time, and he will be our main speaker in a fortnight's time. So if you want to hear more about Mark and be able to ask questions to him, then join us back in 2 weeks' time, and Mark will be the main speaker on that day.
Thank you. Over to you, Kirsty.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Russell, Neil and Mark, for your contribution. It was absolutely amazing. I'm sure we've all taken away some great pointers that we can use and practical tips we can use in our business. So there's lots of people posting on the Zoom group chat. They've posted their LinkedIn profiles, a bit about what they're doing, some of the questions that we didn't necessarily get to. So I'll save these down and I'll share it with everybody after the call, as well as the couple of slides that Russell's got put together. So just thank you, everybody. And we just keep an eye on our IoD events page, and we share the future events that we've got planned, and also any contact details you're needing, just come to either Russell, Neil, or myself. So thank you, everybody. We'll close it there. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.